What's up and welcome to Dark Souls Lore, Prepare to Die Artorias of the Abyss Edition. I'm Marcus, also known as EpicNameBro. This video is quite long, so use the links in the description to jump to the points you are looking for, or suffer the wrath of 1,000 mispronounced words. I'll also try to separate facts from my opinion as much as I can, and I'll try to put some sources in the description as well. Don't forget to buy poison arrows in order to fuck you chair. The new content takes place in the past. Specifically, Dusk says many centuries ago. Well, that's not actually specific at all. I can't put a number on it. Sadly, there is no set rule for many, except that we know that it's definitely more than 2, and probably much more than that. Now, if we consider the Cat Covenant ring, it says that the white cat Alvina speaks a human tongue, and has lived since the early age of fire. Alvina was a trusted friend of Knight Artorias and the Great Wolf Seath. In the new content, the player actually encounters a young Alvina. This could be back in the early days of the Age of Fire, but it is also worth noting that Golf is retired in the new content and the dragons are almost extinct. Gwen has probably already linked the flame as well, since there are bonfires. In other words, this was less than 1,000 years ago. And Londo already seems to be in decline, and it's possible that the deities have already left. So it's difficult to date the new content with a number, but it might be useful to try to place it in the timeline in comparison to the fall of New Londo. There is conflicting evidence here, but I believe that Oolacile fell before New Londo. The key point comes in one of Ingward's dialogues. He says, "But the Abyss is no place for ordinary mortals. Although long ago, the Knight Artorias traversed the Abyss. If you can find him and learn from him, the Abyss may prove surmountable." So to Ingward, Artorias traversed the Abyss long ago. However, Ingward was around during the days when the Abyss opened up in New Londo because he was one of the ones who sealed it. So therefore he is probably referring to the legend that Artorias stopped the Abyss in Oolacile. So I think that Oolacile fell before New Londo. There is, however, a piece of evidence that directly contradicts this. From the Great Sword of Artorias. Sir Artorias hunted the Dark Wraiths, and his sword strikes harder against Dark Servants. That's kind of interesting because we know from the Dark Sword description that when the 4 kings were seduced by evil, their knights became Dark Wraiths, servants of the Dark who wielded these Dark Swords. So Artorias hunted Dark Wraiths, but Dark Wraiths are knights of New Londo, which, according to Ingward, fell to dark long after Oolacile. So there are a few possibilities here, one being that it's simply an oversight by FromSoft, and another is that they retconned Artorias' story. Retcon, for you guys who don't know, means that they changed it. In the newer update, they've actually changed the actual story. This is the most likely possibility to me. We know that they wanted to include Oolacile before, but were forced to cut it due to time constraints. Now, at that time, it's highly possible that they altered the plot to have Artorias challenging the 4 kings rather than Manus. The Cursed Greatsword of Artorias states, "The sword can damage ghosts, as it was cursed when Artorias joined a covenant with the creatures of the Abyss. There are no ghosts in Oolacile, but there are plenty in New Londo." I kind of feel like they flip-flopped on Artorias' story a bit. But then again, they can get away with it. The thing that we have to remember is that the narration that comes from the item descriptions is not omniscient. It's not all-knowing. It also does not represent things that the player character actually knows. Things like the fate of Artorias' sword are especially murky, since you can actually fight Seath while wielding the Abyss sword. So yeah, cursed version, normal version, Abyss version, how did it end up? But I digress. There are some things that you simply have to accept when it comes to balancing gameplay and story. It's always been thus throughout games, throughout all of gaming history here, but my ultimate point is that I believe the fall of Oolacile preceded the fall of New Londo. That's just my opinion. Another indication of this is actually the nature of the Abyss. If you look at the chasm of the Abyss in ancient Oolacile, it's still solid ground. The darkness hasn't really spread too much yet. But the Abyss in present-day New Londo is very advanced in its spread. There's no ground to stand on. New Londo was, however, in existence during the fall of Oolacile. The presence of bonfires indicates that Gwyn has already linked the flames when Oolacile takes place, but he gave a portion of his Lord Soul to the Four Kings before doing so. So when Ingrid talks about Artorias as having traversed the Abyss long ago, yeah, the story gets more than a little bit murky around this point, and murkier still since we can't trust the Artorias-related item descriptions. We know that his legend is actually a deliberate mistelling of what actually occurred, so regardless of when it takes place, let's talk about what actually happened in Oolacile. In a very uncharacteristic manner, FromSoft directly told the story of the new content through dialogues. According to Marvelous Chester, believe it or not, Oolacile has brought the Abyss upon itself. Fooled by that toothy serpent, they've upturned the grave of primeval man and incited his ornery wrath. What could they have been thinking? The first point here is that Chester doesn't refer to Cath or Frampt by name. We don't actually know which one it was or whether it was another as of yet unnamed serpent. Another thing to wonder about is what exactly the serpent told the people of Oolacile. Was Oolacile seeking dark magic? If so, why? Or did they need help fighting against the dragon Calamite? Or were they, like the kings of New Londo, promised the art of life drain? But then again, Chester isn't really a great source. The Kareem folks are a bit crafty and not always to be trusted. So in unprecedented fashion, FromSoft actually gave us a reliable source to corroborate Chester's tale. Hawkeye Goff. In Goff's dialogue, he says,
I suspect thou hast taken a gander at it, but the dark of the abyss, which swallowed poor Artorias, threatens to devour our entire land of Oolacile. It seems that this dire fate is unavoidable. But, seduced by a dark serpent or no, they awoke that thing themselves and drove it mad. One's demise is always one's own making.
And yet once again, Goff doesn't say any names here. Dark Serpent. It seems to refer to Cath, but the Dark Lord ending certainly calls that into question. It could just as easily be Frampt. In any case, From is basically reinforcing a point that we were already a little bit aware of. Either one or both of the serpents that you encounter in the game is untrustworthy, and you are being manipulated. In any case, we do have some basic facts. The people of Oolacile encountered a serpent who tricked them into disturbing the resting place of Manus, and from there, all hell broke loose. So who was Manus? Manus was primeval man, and FromSoft very craftily dodged the question of whether he was a primeval man or the primeval man. Was he the furtive pygmy or was he a furtive pygmy? They are intentionally vague about this point. Now, before the player's first run-in with Manus, you must rescue Dusk of Oolacile from within a crystal golem. These golems are generally associated with Seath. So after you have rescued her, you can encounter a new golem in Seath's archives. Defeating that golem will award you with the broken pendant, which says, half of a broken stone pendant. The vine appears to originate from Oolacile. A powerful magic can be sensed from this ancient stone, yet men of this time can neither manipulate nor sense its power, which has a distinct air consisting of both reverence and nostalgia. A powerful magic can be sensed, but not by men of this time. Okay. It's a bit confusing whether or not your character can sense it or not, but I will say this much. I don't actually read much into it. From generally speaking, doesn't set too much backstory onto the player's character. Since they want you to roleplay, they want you to make your own story. That's my opinion, and other people definitely have different opinions on that. But more importantly, this is part of Manus' pendant. What the fuck is Seath doing with it? I mean, if you go back to the earlier dialogues, Oolacile upturned the grave of primeval man. The grave. Is it possible that Anor Londo has had a run-in with Manus before? Perhaps that's why the broken pendant, as well as Dusk, are sealed in golems. Or banished to a plane of distortion, as Dusk puts it. Maybe they were trying to keep them from Manus. I don't know. But it does seem clear that Seath has some connection to Oolacile. It could be that he was simply after their sorceries. In any case, I'll leave the further speculation about all of that to y'all. But once you have the broken pendant, if you take it to Dusk's Cove, you will see a swirl of dark magic. Interacting with the dark magic will cause the arm of Manus to grab you and drag you into the past. From the soul of Manus, we learn that ancient Manus was clearly once human, but he became the father of the Abyss after his humanity went wild, eternally seeking his precious broken pendant. He is seeking the pendant, or is his humanity seeking the pendant? Once again, they're being coy with us. In any case, his humanity went wild. Remembering that humanity sprites are fragments of the Dark Soul, it seems that the portion of the Dark Soul that he held went out of control. This mirrors closely what happened with the Witch of Izalith, actually. She lost control of her Lord Soul when she attempted to copy the First Flame. But it seems that the nature of the Dark Soul is different from the other Lord Souls. It creates not light, but darkness. From Goff's dialogue.
If thine wish is to succeed poor Artorias, and challenge the spread of the dark, then thou must face Manus, father of the Abyss. The dark emanates from Manus himself. Even if this land shall expire, thou may be able to prevent further corrosion. But even so, one day the flames will fade, and only dark will remain. And even a legend such as thine self can do nothing to stop that.
The dark emanates from Manus, because his humanity, his pieces of the Dark Soul, has gone wild. Killing him will stop the spread for now, but according to Goff, it is only temporary salvation. Previously, I had thought that all of the Lord Souls have grown weaker over time. But now it seems to me that only the Dark Soul grows more powerful as the flames fade. Burning bits of the Dark Soul to kindle the fires removes darkness from the world, but it's simply a plug into the dam. Eventually, the floodwaters will come. This really alters how I see the endings. So regardless of whether or not you are being manipulated by a serpent, your choice is to either accelerate the descent into darkness or cling to the Age of Fire by desperately gathering as much of the Dark Soul as you can and offering it as a sacrifice to the flames. But just because the light is temporary, does that mean it isn't valuable? Gwen didn't think so. He sacrificed everything he had to prevent the flames from fading. And what really awaits in the darkness? Think about the bloated heads of Oolacile. The head of an Oolacile resident whose humanity went wild after being devoured by the Dark of Manus, father of the Abyss. The bloated head is fissured, the cracks lined with innumerable tiny red eyeballs, with a hard outside and mucus-filled inside. No sane person could ever wear it. Nasty stuff going on in the Abyss, y'all. Kind of reminds me a bit of Vagrant, but I digress. But why? Why is Manus so concerned with his precious broken pendant? That's a tough one. But consider the description of Pursuers, which is the sorcery you get from trading his soul to Snuggly the Crow. Sorcery of Manus, Father of the Abyss. Grant a fleeting will to the dark of humanity, and volley the result. The will feels envy, or perhaps love, and despite the inevitably trite and tragic ending, the will sees no alternative, and is driven madly toward its target. Envy, or perhaps love. Well, he did kidnap Dusk, and interestingly enough, she seems to have suffered no ill effects from her time in the Abyss either. Another interesting note is that Pursuers is functionally similar to Homing Soul Mass. In case you have forgotten, and with so many items it's easy to do so, Homing Soul Mass's description says, "Life originates in the soul. No wonder the Soul Mass draws toward it. This sorcery is a window into Seeker Logan's methods." Manus is granting a will to humanity, which is a sort of soul, and Logan is researching the same type of techniques. He also eventually goes insane, and you could say that he is envious of Seath to an extent. That's just another little side note for you lore buffs to consider. I also want to mention that it's not just Manus' spells, but also the humanity enemies in the Abyss that behave in this manner. They don't attack you, really. They just try to touch you, to be close, perhaps even to reunite with you. It doesn't seem that they are actively seeking your destruction, although they can easily cause it. The will feels envy, or perhaps love, and despite the inevitably trite and tragic ending, the will sees no alternative, and is driven madly toward its target. But we can't talk about Manus' pursuit of the Broken Pendant without mention of Chester. He is also a traveler from the future. His dialogue states, "Oh, let me guess. Snatched by a shadowy limb and dragged off to the past?" And if you reply yes, he goes on to say, "Yes, of course, exactly what happened to me. We are both strangers in this strange land, but at least now there are two of us." Ignoring the nifty little Heinlein reference, we see that Chester was also pulled into the past. But why? Manus is seeking his pendant. It seems likely that Chester has the other half. However, he does not drop it when killed, so I wonder if he has already discarded it, or perhaps left it for Manus and fled. I don't know. In any case, Chester isn't to be trusted. Elizabeth will tell you that much as well. Chester, in fact, may or may not be his real name. There's some speculation that he is actually Earl Arstor of Kareem, and that is a definite possibility. It's really likely that he's from Kareem since he is a wielder of the sniper crossbow, which is a weapon used by Kareem snipers. Furthermore, he's fucking good with that thing. The description of his armor set is as follows. Black top hat worn by Marvelous Chester, a man of mystery lost in the past. The wearer of this top hat cracks a dubious, permanent grin, the curse of Chester. And black leather long coat worn by Marvelous Chester. A man of mystery lost in the past. This exquisitely sewn, aristocratic suit allows its wearer to move in silence, lending well to stealth. And these gloves have no distinguishing features, but are of extremely high quality. As well as, these exquisitely sewn trousers are decorated with silver trinkets of varying sizes and have straps on the inner legs for carrying crossbow bolts. So he's an aristocrat. Perhaps an earl? Or the relative of the Earl? I don't know. He's quick to point out that killing Artorias is treacherous. And he's quick to laugh about it too. I wish we had more info on this guy, but an aristocrat from Kareem, that is about the best I can do. I will, however, reinforce the point that Kareem seems to have some interest in the Abyss. You can find a couple of Kareem items in New Londo, as I've discussed before. So we've gone on quite long here, and we haven't even gotten to the part that most people are probably interested in, so let's just do it. But first, Here's my speculation / summary, whatever. My opinion about Artorias. One more time, this is my opinion. I understand if yours is different. I'm not telling you that you're wrong or anything like that. Every player is going to have a different take on this. This is just what I think for now, too. It's highly subject to change. But yeah, my opinion, changeable. I'm not telling you that your ideas about it are wrong. This is just what I think. Artorias went to Oolacile to halt the spread of the Abyss. His compatriot Seath accompanied him. He entered a covenant with a beast of the Abyss, possibly Alvina, and went to the chasm to face Manus. The covenant part of the legend is real, as there is a covenant ring carefully guarded by Seath. Armed with his divine sword and the assistance of his friends, Artorias bravely ventured into the Abyss. However, he never reached Manus. Despite having an unbendable will of steel, he was overcome by the humanity sprites of the Abyss. As he was corroded away, he made one final sacrifice. He unleashed the magic of his great shield as a final act of loyalty to his friend Seath. The barrier that protected the great grey wolf was the final defense of Artorias, and he was forced to withdraw, even discarding his silver pendant, a treasure of Londo with the power to ward off the darkness. Corrupted, he rampaged throughout Oolacile, only to be defeated by you, the eventual conqueror of the Abyss. His admirer, or perhaps lover, Lord's Blade Kieran, asks you for his soul so that she can pay respect to Artorias. After your victory over the Abyss, the legend of Artorias is spread across the land. A false grave is created as a monument to him and to you for your victory over Manus, though no one knows of your role save Elizabeth, Seath, and Alvina. They then endeavor to protect the fake grave of Artorias, but also the very real Covenant Ring. Alvina seems not to remember you from Oolacile. Interestingly, she is extremely concerned with the idea of traitors. Perhaps she sees Artorias' retreat as an abandonment and a betrayal? I don't know. When you encounter Seath at the false grave of Artorias, he recognizes your scent. Despite the fact that he knows of your battle in the Abyss and quite likely of your unlikely salvation of Artorias, he is honor-bound to protect the covenant of Artorias, and perhaps to avenge his fallen comrade. He draws the divine greatsword that he inherited from his fallen friend, only to be slain by you. Now, protected by the power of the promise between Artorias and the beasts of the Abyss, you can slay the 4 kings of New Londo and reclaim their shard of Gwyn's Lord Soul. It is part of the key that you need to face the smoldering Lord of Cinders, and once he is defeated, you are left with the choice. Will you save yourself and spread the Abyss to the world, or will you follow in the footsteps of Artorias and the footsteps of the Lord of Sunlight and sacrifice yourself in an attempt to just temporarily stave off the darkness? And how the fuck does anyone actually think this game doesn't have an amazing story? That's going to be all for today. I've got a lot more to say, actually. I haven't even talked about Goff not being blind or Kieran and the Lord's Blades being related to the Painting Guardians yet. This video is already over long, though, so I'll have to save it for another time. Also, don't be surprised if you see some other games or videos on this channel. I'll always cover Souls news, don't doubt that. But until I have something new, I'll just be casually proceeding towards Platinum on Demon Souls, or doing small challenges, trying out some PvP builds or something on Dark Souls. These games are in my blood, man. Just because I take some time off and do some other stuff doesn't mean they're going anywhere. In fact, if I take some time away from the series, I can come back stronger than ever.